They were never supposed to come back. That's what the priest whispered just before he disappeared. You weren't supposed to hear that, but now that you have, everything changes. You see, some stories slip through the cracks of accepted reality, stories that institutions fear, stories they bury under decades of denial, skepticism, and ridicule, not because they're false, but because they're too true. This isn't fiction. This isn't myth. What you're about to hear is a case so chilling, so meticulously documented, that it has left psychiatrists, scientists, and theologians broken in its wake. It begins in the quiet town of Hexham, England, 1957. A place the modern world had forgotten. Church bells, cobblestone streets, a life marked by routine, until a car, driven by madness, tore 3 children from existence in one instant of brutal chaos. But it's what happened after that death, after the blood had dried and the prayers had stopped, that forced the world to look into the void. 18 months later, Florence and John Robertson, still shattered by grief, welcomed twin girls into the world. Identical, healthy, beautiful. But what unfolded over the next decade would challenge every assumption about memory, consciousness, identity, and what it means to die. The twins began to remember, not pretend, not imagine, remember. Details of lives they'd never lived, names of people they'd never met, scars they shouldn't have, and nightmares of a death no child should know. This case would become the cornerstone of the University of Virginia's decades-long reincarnation study, not folklore, not hearsay, peer-reviewed, photographed, witnessed. And yet, the public was never meant to hear it this way. What if death isn't an end? What if consciousness doesn't belong to the body? What if there are forces, ancient, institutional, and hidden, that want you to forget with Erkian, that your soul has always known? You're not here by accident. The algorithm didn't stumble. You were pulled here because you're ready. Ready to see what most men spend their lives avoiding. Ready to awaken what they've spent centuries suppressing. By the end of this journey, you will not be the same, but only if you keep listening. Because once the truth begins, there's no going back. Welcome to the descent. There's a moment, quiet, invisible, where the world splits, where what we believe collides with what is. And for the Robertson family, that moment came not with thunder, but with a whisper. 3 weeks after Gillian and Jennifer were born, Florence brought them home. To any outsider, they were just babies. Identical, cooing, swaddled in soft blankets. But John knew better. His eyes weren't on their faces. They were locked on the marks. Jennifer, one of the twins, bore 2 distinct features that should have been impossible. A birthmark above her right eye, shaped exactly like the scar Jacqueline, their dead daughter, had received in a childhood accident with a metal bucket. And another mark, dark, round, just above her left hip. A mirror of Jacqueline's own. Identical twins aren't supposed to have different birthmarks. The genetic code doesn't allow for that. Yet here it was, documented by medical staff, photographed, notarized, filed. A genetic impossibility, wrapped in a newborn's skin. But Florence didn't want to see it. Her soul had already been carved out by grief. She couldn't afford to believe, couldn't survive it. So she dismissed it as coincidence, a strange, eerie trick of biology. But John had prayed for this, night after night, kneeling in the silence of his daughter's empty bedroom. He had begged, not for peace, but for proof. And now, as he stared into Jennifer's eyes, he didn't see a newborn. He saw Jacqueline, not metaphorically, not emotionally, literally. He began talking to them like they were his dead daughters, whispering old names in the dark, calling Jennifer by a name no one had uttered since the funeral. Florence was horrified, terrified. To her, John wasn't grieving anymore. He was unraveling. But he wasn't. He was awakening. Because then came the toys. Months later, the twins began crawling, and one day, Florence retrieved a box of old belongings from the attic, toys the dead girls had loved, a doll named Margaret, a stuffed rabbit with one torn ear. The twins went straight for them, no hesitation, no confusion, like reuniting with long-lost friends. Jennifer clutched the rabbit and whispered a single word. Bunny. A name only Jacqueline had used. Florence dropped the toy she was holding. Her hands trembled, her breath shallow. That was the moment she realized. Something had come back. Not just memories. Souls. Florence tried to rationalize. She tried to explain it away, but the mind has limits, and the soul even more so. After the toy incident, she couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. She watched the twins constantly, hoping, praying that she'd find something normal, something that proved her husband was wrong. But the opposite happened. Jennifer and Gillian weren't like other children. They didn't just play. They remembered, not in vague fragments, but in horrifying, intimate detail. At just over 2 years old, the girls began to speak sentences that stopped Florence in her tracks, and one day, it went too far. She stood in the hallway listening. The twins were alone in their room. No one had prompted them. No one was filming. This wasn't for show. Gillian said, "Do you remember that Sunday? You wore your yellow dress." Jennifer nodded. "And Anthony was with us. He told me about the bicycle." Florence's heart stopped. Anthony was the third child killed in the accident. A neighbor boy, dead alongside her daughters. The twins had never been told about him. His name had been banished from conversation like a curse. But that wasn't the worst part. Jennifer continued. Then, the car came. She said it like she was still there, still seeing it. "She was angry," she whispered. "The lady in the car. I saw her face." And then the voice cracked, like a child breaking under pressure. There was blood. I couldn't breathe. My mouth was full of it. Florence burst into the room, hysterical. The girls looked up at her, not frightened, not surprised, just calm. Jennifer even smiled, as if to say, "Why are you so upset, Mother? We've already lived through this." She confronted John that night, demanded answers, demanded he stop, but he only looked at her, eyes hollow with knowing, and said, "You asked God for healing. I asked for return. We both got what we wanted." Florence began to unravel. Not just because of what was happening, but because no one would believe her. The church dismissed it as grief. The doctor called it projection. Friends stopped visiting. Whispers followed them through town. So she stopped talking. But the twins didn't. They started identifying places they had never seen, people they had never met, shops that no longer existed but once had. Gillian described their old school, right down to the peeling paint on the windowsills. Jennifer pointed at a woman on the street and said, "That's the lady who used to give us candy, but she looks older now." The woman turned white. She had indeed known Joanna and Jacqueline, but that was over 2 years before the twins were born. There was no way they could know that. Unless they had never really been born at all, only returned. They say memory is stored in the brain. But what if that's a lie? What if memory is stored in the soul, and some souls don't die? As the girls grew older, the line between past and present began to dissolve. They spoke about their old life, the way most children speak about cartoons, casually, naturally, without fear or doubt. They weren't haunted. They were aware. One rainy afternoon, the family drove through Hexham's town centre. Florence was in the front seat. The twins were in the back, staring out the window. As they passed a familiar intersection, Jennifer suddenly leaned forward and said, "That's where it happened." Florence's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. She didn't need to ask what "it" meant. She already knew. But Gillian continued, pointing at the exact spot where the tragedy had occurred. We were walking here. Then the car came from there. Neither child had ever been told the exact location of the accident. The parents had deliberately avoided it their entire lives. No photos, no stories, no newspapers left lying around. And yet the twins knew. They could draw the scene, recount the moment, speak of it as if it had just happened yesterday. But they were 3 years old, barely able to write their own names. And what disturbed Florence even more wasn't the accuracy, but the emotionless way they spoke about their own deaths. No fear, no trauma, just memory. It was as if dying had become a fact, not a tragedy, and that terrified Florence more than anything else. But John, he saw something different. To him, this wasn't a horror. It was confirmation, proof that the soul survives, that consciousness can carry forward, that death is an illusion, a curtain we mistake for a wall. And he wasn't alone, because by now others had begun to notice. Word spread through the village. At first whispers, then rumors, and finally the attention of Dr. Ian Stevenson, a psychiatrist from the University of Virginia who had devoted his life to researching reincarnation. Stevenson flew across the ocean to meet the family, to investigate, to document. What he found stunned him. This wasn't just another past life story. This wasn't hypnotic regression, folklore, or hearsay. It was evidence, measurable, consistent, and impossible to ignore. He would go on to call it one of the most credible cases of reincarnation ever recorded. But even he couldn't explain what came next. Because as the twins reached school age, the memories deepened. And with them came something else. Fear, sudden, visceral, ancient. Jennifer began to panic every time a car engine backfired. Gillian refused to cross the street unless she held her father's hand. And sometimes, in the middle of the night, Florence would hear them crying, not like children, but like survivors. Reliving a death they'd already died. There's a terror deeper than fear, beyond nightmares. It's the terror of remembering pain you never lived, but somehow always carried. The twins' memories weren't fading. They were sharpening, focusing like a lens on everything Florence and John had tried to bury. One night, Florence was tucking Jennifer into bed when the girl suddenly asked, "Mommy, do you remember when I died?" The words landed like a gunshot. Florence froze. Her hands trembled. Jennifer looked up at her, not playfully, not innocently, calm, grave. She continued, "My head hurt so much, and then it went dark. I couldn't breathe. There was blood in my mouth, and someone was screaming." Florence knelt beside the bed, trying to hold her together. "Jennifer," she whispered, "why would you say that?" The girl blinked, confused by the question. "Because it happened." And then she added, almost apologetically, "But it's okay now. I'm back." Florence collapsed outside the room, sobbing into her hands. But it didn't stop there. At school, the twins began identifying classmates they'd never met, calling them by names from years past. One teacher reported an incident where Gillian confidently corrected her about the layout of the old school building, as it had been before renovations years earlier. She was right. She even remembered the teacher who used to sit in the room, describing her voice and perfume. A teacher who had died before the twins were even born. And then the drawings began. Jennifer would sketch horrific scenes, 2 girls in bright dresses lying on the road, red pooling around them, sometimes a car with wide, angry headlights, always the same, the moment of death, replayed again and again in crayon and silence. No one had told them, no one had described the accident, but the twins knew. And the question that haunted Florence more than any other was this: why? Why were her daughters forced to remember such pain? What kind of soul carries its wounds from one life into the next? She went to the church for answers, The priest told her reincarnation was heresy, that the devil mimics life to sow confusion. But that explanation felt thinner than a veil. She went to doctors. They blamed grief, parental suggestion, maybe even telepathy. But none of it accounted for the marks, the knowledge, the fear. Florence was out of answers, so she turned inward. One night, alone, she looked into the mirror and said the words out loud for the first time. My daughters were born already haunted. And deep down, she knew. This wasn't a gift from God. This was something older. Some truths don't whisper. They stare. Florence began to notice something chilling in the girl's eyes. They weren't curious about the world like other children. They were watchful, as if they'd been here before, as if they were waiting to see if things would happen the same way again. One afternoon, Gillian stood at the window watching the neighbor's boy ride his bicycle. Suddenly she said, "He's going to fall," and hurt his arm. A second later he did, right on the gravel. A sharp cry, blood, and a fractured wrist. Coincidence? Florence told herself it had to be, until it kept happening. The twins didn't just remember. They anticipated. Jennifer once refused to go into a shop in town, shaking, saying, "That man hurt me." There was no man, no one nearby. But minutes later, an elderly gentleman entered, a stranger, silent and slow. Jennifer stared at him with wide, terrified eyes. Florence asked, "Who is he?" Jennifer whispered, "He made me bleed. Before. Before. Not now. Not recently. Before she was Jennifer." The old man had been a former teacher, one who had taught Joanna in the years before her death. Rumors later surfaced that he'd been violent, quick to grab, faster to punish, but nothing had ever been proven. No records, just silence. Until now. Florence's reality was cracking. John, on the other hand, was becoming obsessed. He started documenting everything, the drawings, the dreams, the statements. He wrote letters to universities, researchers, even parapsychologists. Most never responded. But one day, a brown envelope arrived, postmarked from Virginia. Dr. Ian Stevenson wanted to come, to see for himself. He wasn't a mystic, not a preacher, a psychiatrist with credentials, tenure, and over 3,000 case studies of past life memories in children, and he wasn't just interested, he was alarmed. The Pollock twins, he said, were different. Most children who recall past lives forget them by age 5. The memories fade like dreams. But Gillian and Jennifer's intensified. Their accuracy sharpened. Their behavior became more fragmented, as if they were slipping between two lives. He conducted interviews, photographed the birthmarks, cross-referenced the stories with eyewitnesses from the previous life, even tested their reactions to photos of people and places they had never seen in this life, but recognized instantly. Everything matched, every scar, every name, every fear. And then Stevenson said something that stopped Florence cold. These are not memories. These are carryovers. Not just echoes, but continuations. And if the soul can carry wounds, then maybe it can also carry agendas, because behind the memories, something was watching, something that wanted back in. The deeper Dr. Stevenson dug, the darker things became. He noticed it first in their language. Gillian and Jennifer sometimes used phrases that hadn't been spoken in decades, phrases their parents never used, old idioms, slang from the 1940s. At first it was almost quaint, until Gillian looked him dead in the eye and said, "You're not the first one who tried to explain us." Stevenson blinked. He'd never said he was trying to explain anything. And yet, the statement felt intentional, as if someone else was speaking through her, someone older, someone angry. He began asking deeper questions. Do you remember your old home? Do you remember your old parents? What happened the day you left? The girls would sometimes answer. but not always directly. Jennifer responded once, "It doesn't matter. That life is over. But we remember enough." Then Gillian added, almost as an afterthought, "But this time, we'll be more careful." Careful of what? Of who? That night, Stevenson wrote in his field journal, "These children are not merely recalling traumatic events, they are responding to them, as if preparing for something, as if protecting themselves against a fate they've already endured once. There is intent behind their memory, and perhaps something more." The next few weeks brought escalation. The girls began sleepwalking. First just to the hallway, then to the front door. Florence started locking it every night, then adding the chain, then the deadbolt. But one morning, she awoke to find Gillian standing in the garden, barefoot, eyes closed, whispering, "It's not the same house anymore. The light's gone." She had no memory of walking outside. Jennifer, too, had begun to change. She withdrew, stopped playing, refused to sleep with the lights off. One night, Florence found her scribbling furiously on the wall with a red crayon. The image was unmistakable. Lee, two small figures standing in a road, headlights bearing down, and one detail chilled her to her core, the license plate, perfectly drawn, matching the car that had taken her daughter's lives. A detail never released to the public, known only to police and to Florence and John. How could she know? Unless she didn't just remember the death. Unless she had seen the killer. That night, Florence locked the crayon in a drawer, burned the drawing in the fireplace. But in the morning, it was back. Drawn again, this time in both girls' handwriting, and beneath the picture, 5 words scratched into the wallpaper. She didn't mean to stop. Who was she? Why didn't she stop? And more importantly, why were they still holding on to it? Grief doesn't just linger, it evolves. What began as memory had now become pattern. Florence started noticing that the girls weren't just reliving the past, they were trying to rewrite it. They refused to wear dresses like the ones Joanna and Jacqueline had died in, wouldn't play near roads, refused to go anywhere without each other. Even their games were different now, less playful, more ritualistic. They'd line up dolls and reenact scenes over and over again, changing small details each time. One day, Florence overheard them whispering, "This time, we hold hands tighter. This time, we run." The words didn't feel like play. They felt like correction. Meanwhile, Dr. Stevenson's investigation had taken a turn. He'd begun reviewing the original accident, details that had never been made public. The location, the time, the car. The woman behind the wheel had been identified as a local resident, Mrs. Edith Driver, a respected member of the community. No drugs, no alcohol. Just a tragic mistake, a moment of distraction. She'd claimed she never saw them. But the girls' drawings said otherwise. One night, Stevenson returned to the Pollock's home with an envelope. He showed the girls a series of photos, faces of local people from the past, neighbors, teachers, random citizens. The girls scanned them without interest, until they reached the final photo. Jennifer's hand jerked back like she'd been burned. "That's her," she whispered. "Who?" Stevenson asked. Jennifer didn't blink. The woman who didn't stop. It was Edith Driver. A photo taken decades earlier, one the girls had never seen. And then Gillian said something even stranger. She looked different then. "How do you mean?" Stevenson asked. Gillian replied. She was crying, after, but not because of us, because she knew it would happen again. Again. That word echoed through Stevenson's mind. Was this an echo of guilt? A child's imagination? Or were the girls suggesting that Edith had known? That she was part of the pattern too? The reincarnation? The cycle? because if they had returned, who else might have? Florence, now sleepless, became obsessed with the old accident. She dug through police reports, funeral records, even found the original court transcript, and then she discovered something no one had mentioned. Edith Driver had a daughter, a girl the same age as Joanna, a girl who'd died 1 year before the accident. Hit by a bus. Same road, same curve, same time of day. Florence's blood ran cold. 2 tragedies, 2 mothers, and now 2 girls, reborn. But were they the only ones? Or was this entire village caught in some quiet, endless loop? Some places forget nothing. The town of Hexham had always been quiet, modest, stone-built, tucked into the hills like it was hiding. But as Florence began pulling at threads, a disturbing pattern emerged. Children had died on that road before. Not just Joanna, not just Jacqueline, but others. Always near the same bend. Always sudden. Always unexplained. The newspaper archives whispered it all. 1921. A boy crushed by a carriage. 37. A girl vanished. Her doll found in the ditch. 55. Twin brothers, struck while walking home from school. Each death spaced by years, yet eerily alike. And worse. Many of the victims shared birthdays. Florence's hands trembled as she circled the dates. Some of them even shared names. It was as if the town was playing something on repeat, but each version slightly twisted, evolved, rewritten, and somehow her daughters had become part of it. One night, John had a dream. In it, he saw Joanna and Jacqueline standing by the road, not crying, not calling out, just watching. He ran to them, but every step forward took him farther away. He called their names, once, twice. Then they turned and said in perfect unison, "You weren't meant to remember us." He woke up in a sweat, convinced he'd heard it out loud. That morning, Gillian asked, "Daddy, why did you scream last night?" He stared at her. "What else did I say?" he asked. Jennifer answered for her. "You called our old names." Dr. Stevenson's final session with the girls was brief and chilling. He asked one last question. "If you could talk to Joanna and Jacqueline, what would you say to them?" Jennifer tilted her head, smiled faintly. "There's nothing to say. We already did." Gillian added, "They left the door open. We just walked through." Then she looked Stevenson in the eye. "But the door swings both ways." He paused. "What do you mean?" Jennifer leaned-eyed. "They aren't the only ones coming back." And then, for the first time, both girls spoke together, their voices overlapping, not in harmony, but like 2 radio stations fighting for control. "Some come back for love, some come back for justice, and some come back for revenge." Florence felt the weight of it. This wasn't just about her daughters. This was a fault line in time, a fracture where the dead refused to sleep, where grief wasn't healed, it was passed down, worn like skin. And now, she was starting to feel it too. A heaviness in the house, a presence in the corners. Not her daughters. Something older. The past wasn't dead. It had moved in. Some echoes don't fade. They feed. Florence began to feel watched. Not in the theatrical sense, not shadows in mirrors or whispers in the dark. It was subtle, like a memory you didn't make, watching you from inside. She would be brushing her hair and feel hands that weren't hers, smell cigarette smoke though she'd never smoked, wake with scratches on her arms like she'd clawed her way out of a nightmare she couldn't remember. At first she thought it was the girls, sleepwalking again, acting out some buried fear. But then the bruises started, on her, not them. She woke one morning to find a thumbprint on her thigh, deep, blackened, too large to be her own. John examined it in silence, then said, "I've seen this before." He retrieved an old photo album, flipped pages until he found it, one of Jacqueline, age 5, in a summer dress, smiling. But on her arm, the same mark, same place, same shape, same pressure. Florence whispered, "What does it mean?" John looked at her. "It means whatever this is. It didn't start with us." Dr. Stevenson's research had moved beyond science. He began contacting priests, occult historians, even a Buddhist lama specializing in bardo, the state between death and rebirth. They all said the same thing. Most souls pass through. Some get stuck. But one message stood out. Where trauma anchors, spirits cycle. Not all reincarnations are natural. Some are forced, tied to guilt, violence, repetition. They don't evolve. They echo. And then the Lama asked, "Have the children started drawing circles yet?" Stevenson froze. Because yes, they had. Dozens of them. On walls, in notebooks, in condensation on the window. Always the same. A small circle inside a larger one. He had thought it was just doodling. Until Jennifer explained, "The small one is us." "And the big one?" Stevenson asked. Gillian whispered, "The thing that keeps bringing us back." It no longer felt like a miracle. It felt like a trap. Florence decided to test something. She returned to the spot where Joanna and Jacqueline died. Brought the girls. Held their hands. No words spoken. No memories shared. Just silence. Until Jennifer said, "She's not here." Florence asked, "Who?" Jennifer answered without blinking, "The one who took us. Not the driver. Someone else. She left. But she'll come back." Florence looked at Gillian. She was staring at the trees, fingers twitching. "What's wrong?" she asked. Gillian finally said, "I think she's already here." That night, the drawings changed. No more circles. Now they drew eyes, hundreds of them, watching, always open, always staring in the same direction back. Not everything that returns wants to be seen. It began with the mirrors. Florence noticed it first in the upstairs hallway, a fleeting movement behind her, not reflected but delayed. She would walk past, turn her head, and catch her reflection still staring back. Not moving, not blinking. Then the reflections began to smile, not cruelly, not even oddly, just knowingly, like they'd been watching her far longer than she realized. Downstairs the girls had grown quiet. They stopped drawing altogether. No more circles. No more eyes. Just silence. Jennifer would sit for hours, motionless, staring out the window. Gillian began refusing to enter certain rooms, especially the basement. "Why?" Florence asked. Gillian just muttered, "She's listening down there." Florence went into the basement that night. It smelled of wet stone and dust. She turned on the light. Boxes, old toys, forgotten clothes. Nothing strange at first. But near the far wall, behind an old dresser, she found something. Scratches. Deep gouges in the concrete, as if someone or something had clawed at it over and over. And then, words. Faint. Faded. Etched with desperate hands. Only one phrase. "Let them sleep." She backed away, heart pounding, a scream caught in her throat. As she turned to leave, the light bulb above her exploded. Glass rained down. And in the flash before darkness swallowed the room, She swore she saw someone standing behind her. Dr. Stevenson was unraveling. He had stopped documenting the case in journals. Now he wrote letters to himself, dated weeks into the future. His latest one read, "If you're reading this, you stayed too long. You looked too deep. The memories weren't meant for you. They were meant to trap her. The girls are the key, but the lock is older than memory." He called Florence the next morning. His voice was shaking. "I think I know what's happening," Florence whispered. "Tell me." But before he could respond, she heard a strange click. Not the phone disconnecting. A camera shutter. She looked across the room. Jennifer was holding a Polaroid, but the photo wasn't of her mother. It was of the hallway behind her. And in the photo, a third girl stood in the shadows, wearing a torn dress, eyes white, smiling. Florence grabbed the photo. "No," she gasped, flipping through others on the table. The girl was in every photo, always distant, watching. Sometimes just her hand, sometimes just an eye peeking around a corner. She had never been in the house. Yet somehow, she'd always been in the pictures. Later that night, Gillian whispered something in her sleep. She followed us through the door. Florence sat beside her, frozen. Jennifer rolled over and added, "But she didn't come back as a child." Something else had returned with them, and it had never truly left. It had been waiting, behind the mirrors, between the heartbeats, inside the silence. And now, it was awake. There are things worse than death. One of them is remembering it. The girls no longer acted like children. They moved differently now, slow, deliberate, like they were carrying invisible weight. They would pause in hallways, tilt their heads at empty corners, or speak in whispers to things no one else could see. Florence tried to intervene. "Who are you talking to?" Jennifer responded flatly. "The one who stays between." Florence knelt down. "Between what?" Gillian answered without looking up. "Between us." That night, Florence did something she hadn't done in years. She prayed. Not for salvation, not even understanding, just for it all to stop. But deep down she knew, you don't pray for the end of a storm if you've already set sail into it. You just hold the wheel and hope you're not alone. Meanwhile, John had begun to spiral. He refused to touch the girls, wouldn't enter their room, kept locking the bedroom door at night. Florence begged him, "Talk to me." He looked through her, finally muttered, "They're not ours anymore." The next day, he left for work, but never arrived. His car was found parked by the cemetery, still running. Inside, his wallet, his keys, his wedding ring. No sign of John. No note. Just the back seat, covered in dirt. As if someone had climbed in, soaked in graveyard soil. Florence fell apart. But the girls didn't cry. Jennifer simply said, "He remembered too much." Dr. Stevenson arrived in the night, unannounced. Eyes sunken, hands shaking. He carried no clipboard, only a box. Inside were dozens of audio tapes, old, labeled by year, most from the late 1950s. Stevenson whispered, "You need to hear what they heard." He played one. A recording from a different family, different children. But the voices were the same. The same laughter, the same cadence, even the same phrases Jennifer and Gillian had whispered in their sleep. "She's behind the door. Don't let her find the mirrors. We have to close the circle before it closes us." Florence stared at the tape player. "How is this possible?" Stevenson looked at her, barely holding it together. "Because it's happened before. Because it's always the same two girls. And every time someone disappears." Florence recoiled. Jennifer was now standing in the doorway, her voice like ice. It wasn't Daddy's turn. The tape ended with static. Then a whisper, barely audible, not a child's voice, but something ancient, low, broken. It said, "You opened the door. Now hold it open." Florence stood up. Her voice cracked. "What do you mean, the door? What door?" Gillian stepped out of the shadows, holding a drawing. A new one. It wasn't a circle this time. It was a keyhole. And behind it, a face with no eyes, just teeth. And underneath, scrawled in childish letters, "She wants to come through." They weren't her daughters anymore. Florence knew it the moment she looked into their eyes and didn't see fear or sadness, but recognition. They weren't afraid of what was coming. They were preparing for it. Dr. Stevenson returned 3 nights later, pale, drenched in sweat. He had been staying in a motel on the outskirts of town, but something had driven him back. "Listen to me," he gasped, slamming a folder down on the kitchen table. "The cycle isn't random. It's structured, repeating in 33-year increments." Florence blinked. "What?" He flipped through yellowed documents, death records, birth certificates, police reports. "This thing, whatever it is, chooses a pair of children. Every generation. Twins, near twins, orphans, siblings, always 2. He pointed to a photo from 1922, 2 girls, identical dresses, blank expressions. Below it, case closed, gas leak. Another from 1889, 2 boys, found in a well, smiling, eyes missing. "Each time," Stevenson said, "they come back in different bodies, but the memories grow stronger." Florence whispered, "You're saying my girls are part of this loop?" "No," he said. "They're the center of it." Gillian appeared in the doorway, watching, unblinking. She said calmly, "You're not supposed to stop it." Florence turned to her, trembling. "What happens if we do?" Jennifer entered behind her sister. "Then it comes through a different way." That night, Florence took the girls and left the house. She drove until dawn. No direction, just away. But at every gas station, every rest stop, someone stared at the children too long. Cashiers, truckers, a woman with a stroller, like they recognized them, like they'd seen them before. One man even muttered, "Didn't they die back in 56? Florence grabbed the girls and ran. They ended up in a motel outside Ashbridge, room 7, cold, damp, but qui. Florence turned on the television to drown the silence. The screen flickered and showed her house, live, camera angle from inside the hallway, right outside the girls' bedroom. No sound, just grainy black and white footage, like security cam footage from nowhere. Florence screamed, unplugged the TV. The screen stayed on. Jennifer whispered, "She found us." Florence locked herself in the bathroom, hyperventilating. Through the door, Gillian whispered, "It's okay, Mommy. It's always the mother at the end." She didn't sleep that night, and when she finally dared step out of the bathroom, the girls were gone. The motel door stood wide open. On the floor was a note scrawled in charcoal. "The door is open now." Florence ran outside, screamed their names. Nothing. Then, a sound behind her. Click. She turned. Jennifer was standing there, holding a Polaroid. The photo developed in seconds. It showed Florence, alone. Behind her, the motel door. And, in the darkness, a figure crawling through it. Long limbs, no eyes, just a mouth, open. The girls stood on either side of her now, not crying, not speaking, just watching. Jennifer held her mother's hand, then whispered, "You don't remember what you were before." But she does. And she's been waiting to finish what started in the first life. And that's when Florence finally asked the question she had been too afraid to voice until now. Who is she? Gillian smiled softly. She's what's left when no one lets go. The motel burned to the ground that night. No cause was ever determined. No survivors were found. But witnesses claimed they saw 3 figures walking away just before the flames reached the roof. 2 small, 1 taller, heading into the forest, smiling. That's where the trail goes cold, for most. Police closed the case. The media moved on. Tragedy, they called it. Just another unspeakable loss. But Dr. Stevenson didn't stop, because the folder he carried that night didn't just contain the past. It also contained coordinates and a date. Ashridge State Forest, August 7th, 1990, 3:33 a.m. Stevenson hiked out alone, carrying only a flashlight, a tape recorder, and a crucifix he no longer believed in. The deeper he went, the quieter it became. No wind, no insects. Even the trees seemed to hold their breath. Until he found it, a stone circle. Ancient, weather-worn, covered in moss. 6 feet wide. In the center, ashes. Human-shaped. And surrounding the circle, dozens of drawings. Nailed to trees. Most in crayon. Some in blood. All of them showed the same thing, a door, floating in blackness, with something behind it, something smiling. He pressed record on the tape. "This is Stevenson, August 7th. I've reached the site. I don't know what I'm looking for, but A sound. Footsteps. He turned. No one. Then, laughter. A child's, but distant. Warped. He backed away. "Hello?" he called out. "Is someone there?" The laughter stopped. Then a voice whispered, right beside his ear, "You brought her with you." The recorder caught it. You can hear it today. Online. Buried. Downloaded. Scrubbed from every academic archive, but still passed around in forbidden forums. No one's ever identified the voice, because no human vocal cords can bend like that. Stevenson was never seen again, but the recorder was mailed to the University of Virginia. No note, no fingerprints, just one word scratched into the plastic casing: open. The university quietly shut down their reincarnation program 1 month later. All research seized, all staff reassigned. Official reason? Violation of ontological ethics. No one ever explained what that meant, but buried in one professor's resignation letter was a single sentence that still echoes in dark corners of the web. The body is not the container of the soul, it is the leash, and when the leash breaks, something else walks in. Ashridge Forest was never the same. Locals stopped going near it. Animals avoided the northern edge entirely. Hikers went missing. No bodies, no tracks. Just one thing left behind every time, a drawing, sometimes folded in pockets, sometimes pinned to trees. Always the same image, the door, sometimes closed, sometimes half open. 33 years passed, and then it started again. A family moved into the outskirts of Durham. 2 daughters, quiet neighborhood, friendly neighbors. The girls? One liked to draw circles. The other, she whispered in her sleep, she's behind the mirror. But this isn't where the story ends. Because the girls from the last cycle, the ones we thought were the story, they never left. Not really. In 2023, a podcast went viral. Voices in the Static. One episode focused on the Stevenson tapes. The host had found someone, a woman claiming to be Gillian. Older now, different name, different life. But when asked if she remembered anything from the Ashridge fire, she said only one thing: "Fire doesn't kill what doesn't breathe." Then the podcast went dark. The hosts vanished. Their final episode, never aired, was leaked weeks later. It's just 12 seconds long. The sound of two girls laughing, then whispering in unison, "Ask her your name," followed by a click and static. Theories spread fast. Cults, curses, mass psychosis. Some claimed it was all fiction. Others claimed the girls were avatars, recurring spirits trapped in an endless karmic wheel. But one forum user, now deleted, said something that chilled everyone. "It's not about the girls. It's about what walks through when we stop seeing children as children." Because that's the truth, isn't it? We ignore them, dismiss their fears, tell them the darkness isn't real, that nothing hides in the closet, that they're just having bad dreams. But what if the dreams remember us? What if they're trying to tell us, "You closed the door too late"? Florence's fate was never confirmed. Some say she burned with the motel. Others say she walks the halls of psychiatric hospitals under a false name, still drawing the keyhole, still whispering, "She's almost through." There's one final photo, never released publicly, taken in 2025 by a trail cam deep in Ashridge Forest. It shows two children holding hands, backs to the camera, standing before an old wooden door, a door with no frame, no walls, just floating there, wedged into the trees. Behind the door, darkness. And in that darkness, a hand. Not human, not waiting. Reaching. There's a threshold no one remembers crossing. But once you're past it, the world is different. The air feels heavier. Mirrors hum, and you start seeing reflections of yourself doing things you never did. A retired detective named Harold Crane reopened the Florence Alden case in 2026. He was 71, no badge, no authority, just obsession. He had been the responding officer the night the motel burned. He saw Florence, carrying something wrapped in cloth. He never told anyone. Until now. He posted a message to an encrypted board 2 weeks before his death. "I know what the girls brought back. It wasn't her. It was memory. Ancient, hungry, not alive, not dead. Just trapped, waiting for a shape. And now that shape is common." Attached to the message was a blurry photo of a Polaroid. In it, 3 children, 2 standing, 1 crouched behind them, too dark to see. But if you brighten the photo, the crouching child has no face, only a hand on each girl's shoulder. Harold was found in his apartment 3 days later, mouth filled with ash, no burns, no fire, just ash. And written on the mirror, in what looked like charcoal, "She remembers being born inside you." By now you've heard the whispers, haven't you? The stories online, the viral clips that vanish after 33 views. Kids drawing spirals, people waking up outside with dirt under their nails, mirrors that blink when you don't. It's always the same symptoms. Sleeplessness. The sound of scratching under beds. Doors creaking at 3:33 a.m., a photo you don't remember taking. And sometimes, children you don't remember having. A woman in New Hampshire documented her daughter's dreams for 11 nights straight. The last entry, she said she walked through a door made of teeth, and when she turned around, she was still holding my hand. But I wasn't me anymore. She disappeared the next day. The day Butter was found in the basement, humming, holding a drawing, a black door, and written above it in perfect cursive, "The mother always forgets." And maybe that's why Florence mattered. She remembered, not just what happened in this life, but the last, and the one before that. And every time, it was the same. Two girls, one mother, one door, and something behind it, asking to be let in. Do you feel it yet? That crawling tension behind your spine? It's not fear, it's recognition. Because maybe this story isn't fiction. Maybe you've heard it before, in a dream. Or in your childhood. Everyone thinks the scariest part is when the door opens. They're wrong. The scariest part is when it doesn't. Because then, it's already inside. Rural Missouri. A young boy named Levi began drawing the same thing every day in class. A tall black door with fingers growing out of the keyhole. His teacher, alarmed, called in a counselor. Levi said calmly, "It follows the ones who look too long." He stopped speaking entirely by week 3, only wrote messages backward, in charcoal. One message, when reversed, read, "You're not your last self yet." Another, "She remembers everyone she's ever worn." Levi disappeared during a field trip, inside a corn maze. Only thing left behind was his backpack and a Polaroid. The photo, blank. Until you tilt it under light, then you see it. A woman's face, upside down, pressed against glass, smiling. In 2027, a cult called the Memory Sisters began uploading cryptic videos to the dark web. They wore masks made of antique dolls. They didn't speak. They just stared into the camera, holding signs. The mother dies first. She climbs in through dreams. We are just the echo. The final video was titled, Cycle 34 Begins. It shows a woman asleep on a couch. Then a child slowly walks into frame and whispers something into her ear. The woman jerks awake, eyes wide with horror, but her mouth isn't hers anymore. It stretches, too far. And then the screen goes black. Here's the thing most people miss. The story doesn't care if you believe it. It doesn't care if you close the tab or turn off your phone, because it's not looking for your belief. It's looking for your memory. Specifically, the part you forgot. Ever stare at an old photo and feel something wrong, like a shape in the background that wasn't there before? That's her. She rewrites the past. And if you ever hear a child whisper, "Don't remember me," run. Because you already did. And that's why she found you again. Somewhere deep in the Ashridge forest, the door still stands. Rotting, breathing, listening. And if you go there, they say you'll hear a voice, a little girl, not begging, not warning. Just saying softly, "Mommy, let me in. I remember your name now." There's a reason you flinch when you hear your name whispered from an empty room. It's not superstition, it's recognition. Because deep down, some ancient part of you remembers you've been called before. An orphanage in Maine. Routine check. Nothing abnormal. Until a social worker finds a locked closet behind a false wall. Inside, 17 drawings, 1 tape recorder, a mirror, shattered from the inside. The tapes were sent to authorities. Only one has sound, just static, then breathing. Then a girl's voice. "Mommy was different before the fire. Now she walks wrong. Now she doesn't blink." Then silence, until one final whisper. "She said I was the last one, but I saw more waiting." The social worker quit that day, moved out of state, changed her name. But in her resignation letter, she included a single photograph. A group of children sitting cross-legged, smiling, normal, except one. The girl at the back, blurred, eyes too large, face too calm. And in her lap, a doll with no face. Experts said it was motion blur, but someone enhanced the image years later. And what they found, hidden in the pixel noise behind the children, made the file unshareable on public servers. A figure, looming, not human, but wearing human skin, badly. Like a memory that forgot how people are supposed to look. Now here's where it gets worse. This isn't about ghosts or demons. It's about pattern recognition. Every 33 years, 2 girls, a door, a mother who remembers too late, and the thing that walks in wearing her grief like a skin. Still think this is fiction? In 2028, a live streamer in Pennsylvania set up a 24/7 cam in his kid's bedroom, trying to prove there were no ghosts. He laughed at the commenters, mocked the fear, said, "It's all in their heads." Until day 17.333 a.m. He wasn't home. But the camera caught this. His daughter sat, faced the mirror, and in the glass, another version of her, smiling, holding a black key. The next morning, the child wouldn't speak. She just pressed her hand against the mirror and whispered, "The other me said I can stay longer this time." Doctors blamed trauma. Internet blamed hoax. But people who watched the live stream all reported the same thing afterward. Their reflections lagged. Not always, just at night, just when they were alone. The reflection isn't copying you anymore. It's watching, waiting. Because once you remember, once you see the pattern, the door opens again. And this time, she knows your face.